Hi, let us take a look at, let me share the screen here, Chapter 19. Chapter 19 covers infancy through adolescence, and there's a lot of information packed in here. We're going to take it stage by stage, and of course, I am not going to read every line in these slides, but highlight some very important content as we go. But let's start with some generalizations. We certainly have cutting edge healthcare techniques, procedures, surgeries in this country, but we aren't doing very well with our chronic diseases. And we're seeing the same with children. We have increases in obesity, type 2 diabetes. Now, a lot of this is due to lifestyle changes that have shifted dramatically. Kids aren't running around in active play as they used to. They're spending more time on those very entertaining electronic devices. But our diet has changed as well, right? Just as adults are consuming more sugar sweetened beverages and ultra processed foods and fast foods, so are our kids, and they're not getting the healthy foods that they need for growth, for development, and for good health. So when we talk about nutrition and adequate nutrition and monitoring that, the most potent indicator of nutritional status is growth. So this is the reason, if you have children, that so much attention is spent on every visit to recording growth. Beneath the age or under the age of 2, we don't use BMI. We use length and we use weight. And that is followed very carefully. You can see here that this is Ella, and Ella was tracking around the 50th percentile, but then she's bumping up, okay? Now that does not necessarily mean there is a problem, but that would be a little red flag for her healthcare team to check into. Is anything going on here? You know, is the diet look good? Does the exercise look good? Or are there other health or socioeconomic issues? It is a concern. Now, we have here the 2 to 20 years chart, and we see here that BMI is increasing. So we would have the same indicator. There was one other thing I wanted to tell you about this chart, however, and that is that BMI numbers are used differently for children than for adults. So if you choose a child for your Nutrition Applied assignment for Unit 6, you need to make sure to use the BMI indicator for children, and then you need also to be sure to interpret that correctly, which the calculator does for you, because this is how the BMIs are used for children on a percentile scale. So if the BMI is over 95%, that's considered obese. Let me go back one. This is Logan, and Logan above the 85th percentile would be considered overweight for his age. Again, a red flag, not necessarily a problem, but a red flag enough to need to look into that. On the other end of things, we have failure to thrive. About 5 to 10% of infants and children don't grow as they should. This can have a specific medical cause, but 80% do not. There are typically other non-medical issues going on here. It could be socioeconomic. It could be parenting in issues. It could be having to do with inexperience with infant feeding and how to do this correctly. Remember that not every parent has proper guidance in this area. So we need to step in. We need to hook parents up, connect them to the proper support people and resources for sure. For instance, one of the things that some parents don't know is that children, when they're eating, or more is going on than just consuming food and nutrients. In that eating environment, whether it's the baby with a bottle or at the breast or at a table, there's bonding going on. There's development, social development going on as well. So it's very, very important that parents know they shouldn't be propping babies with bottles and going about their busy lives. They need to hold the baby when they're feeding. They need to sit down at the table when the children are eating. Okay, so we're going to talk through infancy here. And as I mentioned, I will be highlighting some major points, but you can certainly review these slides and stop and start to read them. The highest energy needs at any point in the lifespan is during infancy based on body weight. And you see that here, a 6-month-old child needs 47 calories per pound. A 20-year-old woman needs 16 calories per pound. So those calories are adequately provided by breast milk, or infant formula, okay? But at 4 to 6 months, somewhere in that range, the diet needs to be supplemented. Carbohydrate needs are kind of relatively high for infants when you think that the minimum needs for adults are 130 grams. They're provided by the breast milk or the formula. There's no need for fiber during those early months, but as children begin to add foods to their diet, certainly fruits, vegetables, and whole grains should be part of that. Protein needs are from 9 to 11 grams based on the age. Too much protein, and I've seen this quite a bit in your assessments that you do, too much protein can actually have a negative impact on the kidneys. It's too much for the infant's kidneys. Fat needs are about 30 grams per day, but it's not just fat, right? It's type of fat, and the essential fatty acids are very important. All fat is important for nervous system development, but certainly DHA takes on extra importance. And vitamins. We talked about vitamin K, that infants need an injection because they have a sterile GI tract. Breastfed babies need a vitamin D supplement. And the same goes for infants who are not drinking at least a quart of formula a day. And babies who are breastfed from mothers who are vegans need a B12 supplement. Iron stores are depleted by 6 months. So what that means is breastfed babies need a supplement starting at about 4 months. Formula-fed babies should be getting iron fortified formula. And at 6 months, we're concerned about iron. So that's the reason it's very typical to add an iron fortified baby cereal as one of the first foods. There's zinc and fluoride. Fluoride's important because breast milk and formula are poor sources. Supplements aren't recommended before 6 months, but after 6 months, a fluoride supplement is recommended. Water, of course, babies need water, but they get what they need in the breast milk or the formula. And supplemental water is not recommended because it can get in the way of them consuming adequate breast milk or formula. That being said, dehydration can be very serious for babies and can damage their kidneys. So it's important to know the signs of dehydration with infants. And very often, nurses and nurse practitioners review these with their parents who are concerned about their babies. Are they having the right number of wet diapers per day? Does their urine smell especially strong or have a dark color? Do they seem very fussy? Do they have dry mouth and lips? And are they crying tears? Those are all signs of dehydration. We've already talked about this, so I won't go into a whole lot of detail, but I will say human breast milk is amazing. It has many benefits for not only the infant, but the mother, and it changes as the baby grows to meet the baby's needs. And you can see it has a lot of fat because fat is what the baby needs in order to grow and develop the nervous system. And it provides the right type and amounts of carbohydrate and protein. Now, that being said, mothers who decide not to breastfeed or can't breastfeed can raise healthy children with formula. They still need to be able to be coached in that area. There's a lot to learn as far as sanitation, quality control guidelines. Certainly, if you're mixing up dry powder with water, you have to be careful to mix it correctly. Too much fluid and your baby doesn't grow well, or too much water and your baby doesn't grow well, too much formula and you're stressing the baby's kidneys. There are different types of formula, and cow's milk is at the base of some, but it has been heated and changed. So you should not feed an infant untreated cow's milk before the age of 1. Okay, now at 6 months, the baby is ready for some table food, but this is added to the breast milk or formula, and it can be challenging. It can also be quite fun because a baby who's ready will delight in, tasting new foods. The benchmark, or maybe goalpost is a better word, is that at 1 year of age, that baby, okay, soon to become a toddler, should be eating basically table food in smaller portions, healthy table foods. And we need to be especially careful to respond to the infant's cues of not only hunger, but satiety. The clean your plate syndrome can begin in infancy by parents. If you're feeding a baby a bottle, when that baby is full, healthy infants have perfect appetite regulation. When that baby is full, that baby will turn their head away. And if there's this much formula in the bottle, some parents will chase the baby around and try to force them to eat that. Same thing with feeding first foods. When the baby's finished, that baby has good appetite regulation. Let the baby be finished. All right. And here is, I am getting a lot of dinging, so I'm going to turn off my phone for a minute. Here is a sample menu for a 1-year-old child. I think these are really, really helpful. You can look here and see that almost every food in this lineup, if not every food, okay, I see an oatmeal cookie, no raisins. Every food is safe. It's in small amounts, not adult sizes as far as portions, and it's also nutrient dense. Okay, this is what our children should be eating. And from looking around and observing the children in your life, it's probably not what you're seeing kids eating. Okay. So when we're talking about readiness for what your textbook calls solid foods, I kind of like first foods better, because solid foods, it's kind of a misnomer. It's not really solid, right? They're purees. Before 4 to 6 months, infants are not physically mature for anything besides formula and breast milk. General readiness signs are they reach about 13 pounds. Okay, they're consuming more than 32 ounces of formula or breastfeeding more than 8 to 10 times in 24 hours. Adding the food has been shown not to influence sleeping through the night, so that is false. It's just coincidental when parents notice it. Studies have not shown that. Now, at 4 to 6 months of age, the infant needs more calories and more iron, so there's a nutritional need for adding in those first foods. but we also have to be aware of their physiological capabilities and their physical abilities. The swallow is a very complex series of muscular movements. When you feed a baby and they're pushing everything out, that baby's not quite ready. They should be able to hold their head, okay, without support. They should be able to sit up. Now, at the same time, what's very important is to notice that whole proteins can be absorbed from birth until 4 to 5 months of age, which means that they are not broken down into the amino acids that they should be, and they can cause allergies. So there's a whole lot of reasons you do not want to push first foods on babies before they're ready. There are tips for, along with adorable children, if I may say, there are tips for how to do this, okay? And most parents leave the pediatrician with pamphlets and with some guide sheets. I think it's important to be calm, to be casual, to not expect too much, only 1 or 2 bites of the first meals, and also not to introduce too many meals at the same time. One of the main reasons for this is to be able to track any intolerances or allergies. There's a new philosophy around feeding infants, mostly based in the UK, called baby-led introduction to solid foods. I'm not sure I think it's so much different than what we're recommending in this country. It's basically saying meet their developmental milestones with their food that they're ready for. And you can read about this. Okay, as far as weaning from the breast or bottle, at about 6 months of age, you can start putting some breast milk or formula or water in a sippy cup. That's much better for preventing the problems that you're seeing here with these serious baby bottle decay type issues. Using bottles filled with sweetened foods allows, even using bottles with water, allows that infant to continually bathe those budding teeth in a sugary substance that causes horrible decay. Infants should drink from a cup by a year, and they should be weaned from the bottle by at least 18 months. Okay, here's some what not to feed an infant, so take note of this, and I'll let you read through. And we've already mentioned cow's milk, add on goat's milk, and other plant-based milks. They're not the correct nutritional composition for infants. Okay, check with your pediatrician. We have a new one, and that's fruit juice. Infants don't need fruit juice. Skip the added sugars for sure. And we'll talk about nutrient supplementation. This should be only under the guidance of your pediatrician. So this is relatively new advice from the American Academy of Pediatrics. Kids are drinking far too much juice, sometimes as a replacement for soft drinks, but juice is still packed with calories and sugars, although the 100% fruit juice does have natural from fruit sugars, it's still sugar. So there are limits for juice, and it starts with none. No juice before age 1, and only a little half a cup for ages 1 to 3. Juice can interfere with the consumption of milk or formula in the up to 1 year age, and it certainly doesn't have the fiber that we find in whole fruit. And it can contribute to obesity as well. As far as toddlers and preschool children, we're moving along here. There are some nutrients of concern, okay, and there's very different behavior because growth rate tapers off. This leads to a reduction in appetite, and what parents perceive as pickiness or, quirks around food. Much of this is just because the kids aren't growing as fast as they should not. Okay, that's normal, and it leads to a reduction in appetite. However, there are some problem nutrients. Iron can be one of them, especially for children who drink loads of milk and love dairy foods, but don't really like the good iron sources like the meat, fish, chicken, etc. Okay, calcium is another nutrient of concern, especially with so many beverage options these days. The recommendations are whole milk up to 2 years of age, and after that, taper down to the reduced fat or fat-free. And non-dairy beverages can provide enough calcium. I would always consult with a pediatrician about when those can be introduced. Too much sodium can cause problems for all of us, and kids are eating a lot of it. So we need to really watch that as well. And I already mentioned about picky eating. They're just not as concerned about food in the toddler years. There's a lot going on. They're more concerned about playing and exploring, and their taste buds can be very sensitive, which can lead to things like food jags. Caretakers need to be very patient, and they also need to understand that it can take many exposures for a food to be acceptable. As far as improving acceptance of nutrient-dense food, certainly involving children in all of the food-related steps, from grocery shopping to preparation, using the smaller plates and the plates with sections so the foods stay separated from each other, and making food fun. Finger foods, dips, those are foods that children love, and save the best for last. Okay, serve the challenging food first. If you're trying to get your child to eat broccoli, put broccoli out first and bring in the other foods like the chicken and the mashed potato a bit later. Also, redefine snacking. We can get a lot of nutrients in through snacking. Snacks should be nutritious. I like this, do not overreact. Children will never starve themselves. And that has more to do, it ended up on this slide, but that has more to do with feeding in general, okay? Letting food and mealtimes turn into a battleground is never a good idea. Healthy kids are not going to starve. So not overreacting, offering a couple of nutrient-dense options, and then saying, okay, if you are finished, you're finished. They will not starve. Maybe a healthy snack later would allow them to get more nutrients. And here are some ideas for those healthy snacks. So I wanted to mention Pediasure because I hear more and more about it for picky children. We just talked about the fact that some of this pickiness may be just the changes in growth rate. So this may be an overreaction. Pediasure was initially designed for seriously critically ill children with growth problems, but now it's being used by a lot of parents just as a kind of NutriShake. Take a look at the label and tell me what you see as the problem. And this is for 1 serving mixed up, okay? So it makes, I believe, an 8-ounce serving. Okay, and what you should be seeing is the sugar. This is a high sugar milkshake with a lot of nutrients, vitamins, and minerals added in. This can cause the problem of kids not being able to tolerate water because they've been drinking nothing but sweetness. And it can contribute to the problems of picky children. If you are given a milkshake every time that you're hungry and perhaps didn't like what was for dinner, you would have to think this is a pretty good deal. So be careful, work with your pediatrician for sure. If Pediasure is necessary, that should come from the pediatrician. Okay, another problem we're seeing now that we never saw before was constipation, pediatric constipation. So this can be an issue, and it seems to be rooted in most cases due in lifestyle, that kids aren't drinking enough fluid, eating enough fiber, getting enough exercise. Of course, you should rule out medical causes first, but lifestyle changes may do the trick. Some other problems with school-age children are here. Oh, I'm sorry, we are moving on to school-age children. I'm losing track of my stages. So we're moving on to school-age children. You can see that there's a lot of overlap, not enough of the healthy foods, but now we're getting more pressure from peers. I like these graphics that give you an idea of how much is appropriate, because one of the problems we have these days is with supersizing portions. Parents think that their kids should be eating adult-sized portions. This is a normal-sized plate. And look at the amount of food that a 2-year-old eats, a 4-year-old eats, an 8-year-old eats. Little kids need little portions. If we overdo the portions, but it's not quite as simple as that, as we've talked about, there are many, many reasons for our childhood obesity problem, but it is a problem. Diet and inactivity are factors that are major factors that are causing this crisis. The result or the implications and complications of childhood obesity, though, are many. From type 2 diabetes to high blood lipids, to fatty liver disease, to psychosocial problems. So this is a huge issue. And I will tell you, because there's often someone who gets very upset and says parents should be more careful. I'm not taking the responsibility off of parents, but I'll tell you, this can sneak up on parents. You have a healthy child who might be a very good little person who plays quietly and doesn't cause a big mess, unlike, the other children, and becomes a little thick, a little plump. At that point, you begin to try to push the child to do more exercise or to go outside and play, but they're not really comfortable with doing that. They're not quite as fit or coordinated, so they come back in. Okay, and the problem worsens. So it is a sneaky thing, and parents need more support. They need more guidance. They need more programs, and we certainly need to catch this early in order to reverse these trends. Some of the suggestions are to limit screen time, get TVs out of bedrooms, exercise together as a family, and of course, change the diet. Get the sodas out of the house. They're not good for anyone, I should say. Get rid of the high calorie snacks, except maybe, for a special celebration or when you're going out to eat, perhaps. When you have an obese child, weight loss is not typically the recommendation. It is to allow that child to kind of stabilize and grow into their weight. And if weight loss is needed, it's very gradual for sure. We also have issues with kids and cardiovascular disease, which is linked to so many other issues as well. So this is why blood lipids are followed, especially for overweight children, and type 2 diabetes, which is increasing at alarming rates. It's something that was never found in children in the past. We see often that this runs in families, and we see most often that it occurs in overweight or obese children. A couple other things. Breakfast is good for kids. It gives them a good start on high quality nutrients, and it also gives them the energy and satiety they need to make it through the morning. Fats are not a dirty word, remember. Fats can be healthy, and kids should get healthy fats. So they need their omega-3s, they need their plant oils, and they should avoid the trans fats and the high saturated fat foods. We've talked a bit about this. Sodas and juices and sugar sweetened beverages, these are dramatically contributing to overweight and obesity in children and crowding out more nutritious foods. So replace the juices. Moving to juices from soda is a good step, but then you have to keep on stepping, and you have to replace the juices, the 100% fruit juices, with whole fruits or cut up fruits, something with the fiber. Okay, so on to the teenage years. Huge changes as far as social changes, sexual maturation, growth changes as well. Big spike in appetite and increased calorie needs. What we need to keep in mind as far as recommendations, now we're kind of moving toward adulthood, right? So we're seeing a lot of the same recommendations: less saturated fat and added sugars, more vegetables and fruit, lean meats, whole grains, and an active lifestyle. Some of the nutrients of concern are calcium and vitamin D because of all those substitutes for beverages that we now have. And iron, okay, young men or teenage boys, I should say, put on a lot of muscle mass, and they have an iron need for that, for the myoglobin. And teenage girls begin to menstruate, and they have to replace the iron that's lost. So teenagers need to eat iron-rich foods. The fast foods can be a problem. An occasional is not an issue. The mainstay of the diet can be. It's understandable. This is something that teens love the taste of. It's fun with friends, and yet it adds lots of calories and unhealthy substances to the diet. So parents working to have healthier options in the house is a good start. And then attempting to limit the excursions to fast food restaurants is another good recommendation. Caffeine is a newer issue with teens as far as overconsumption of caffeine. This can affect neurological and cardiovascular development and more frequently cause some disturbances in sleep patterns. So this is an issue for teens, and especially with the high caffeine beverages that are now available, could also lead to caffeine poisoning. Can cause arrhythmias and heart palpitations. So it's something to keep a check on. The American Academy of Pediatrics advises a caffeine limit of 100 milligrams per day. Very, very lastly, food allergies, certainly not only a childhood thing, but early introduction of solid foods can cause food allergies because the GI tract is not fully developed. It's more like a chain link fence. It's leaky. So whole proteins can move through, and then the body reacts to them as if they are a foreign substance, and it needs to get the immune system going. And after that, then you have an allergy to that food. So we see a lot of different reasons we're seeing more allergies. Here are the most common. A couple of things I would say. Someone who suspects a food allergy needs to see a doctor who specializes in this, because you don't want to limit your diet if it's not an allergy. There's a difference between allergies and intolerances. Intolerances may cause you to feel bad after consuming something, but it's not a problem with your immune system, and it typically isn't quite as serious. Some allergies, by the way, are outgrown as well. So you may have had an allergy as a child, but then not as an adult. Living with food allergies, cooking food may eliminate some of the problem, but avoiding food is the more frequent recommendation. So there you see 80% of young children outgrow before they're 3 years of age. Whole list of things that the American Academy of Pediatrics has recommended. And basically it's saying there's no evidence to recommend maternal restrictions of allergens during pregnancy or breastfeeding. This doesn't seem to matter. No evidence to recommend any specific duration of breastfeeding. Very limited evidence to recommend changing the formula for high-risk infants. No evidence to recommend delaying the introduction of allergenic foods. And here we have some evidence. Evidence that early introduction of peanut protein reduces the risk for peanut allergies, but I would make sure to check with a pediatrician about that. All right, thank you.